Welcome to the Urban Living Podcast, where we discuss the latest issues of the day with hospitality and real estate leaders.
Okay, so today I'm speaking with Honor Barratt from Birchgrove about the senior and retirement living market. Honor, could you start by giving us a bit of demographic background to the senior living sector in the UK? What percentage of the population is currently 55 and over, and how fast is this rising?
Okay, George. Well, I don't actually know the percentage who's over 55, but there are a ton of them. There is a massive explosion coming our way. I think we all are familiar with the concept of the baby boomers. So there's a ton of them, but just before the baby boomers, there's what's called the silver generation. And those people are probably about 80 now, and they are growing in numbers. Life expectancy is increasing, growing in affluence. More of them in couples than ever before. We also have the concept of the silver splitters, so people who get divorced quite late in life and then get married again. So that's why there's so many more couples. So there's a ton of people who are raising their heads now, looking around and considering a world where their daughter, because it's always the daughter is not going to be the one who steps up to, move mum in to live with her until mum dies, because the daughter's still looking after her teenage children and potentially some grandchildren. She's squeezed in the middle, and the care that the daughter used to provide is now outsourced to retirement living, and that's the sort of slack that we're picking up at the moment in retirement.
Okay. And in the UK, how does the number of senior living units as a percentage of total housing stock compare with other countries and regions? Are we undersupplied?
Yeah, we're hugely behind the curve, and I've never really understood why we're such late developers. We are underperforming. So, for example, the most developed markets are the US and Australia, where about 6% of their over 55s live in specific accommodation built for them, whereas in the UK it's 0.6%. So we've got quite a long way to go. I don't know why that is. I think probably price of land. Maybe Australia and the US just have the space to do it at scale and do it really well. There's no sense if you have to compromise or downsize. You can move into a 2,000 square foot retirement apartment, whereas here on our tiny little island, we are always trying to squeeze someone from their big 4-bedroom house into 750 square foot. Maybe that's why we're such late bloomers, but we are definitely behind the curve.
Mm-hmm. Another major difference between the UK and other countries is we're kind of obsessed with owning our homes here, and that has traditionally filtered through to the retirement market. But you're pioneering a rental model, which is beginning to gain traction with other players in the market too. So how does that work, and what are its main advantages for the customer and for the developer and operator?
Yeah, so I think the Tories in the Daily Mail have made us obsessed with our home ownership, and it's quite understandable actually. Most of us have made more money out of the increasing value of our house than we ever do out of our jobs. So stepping off that housing ladder, I mean, it's quite a shock. And certainly most of the institutions just didn't believe that we could ever persuade somebody to step off a housing ladder at the age of 80 and go into something that felt as insecure and fragile as rented accommodation. I think also in this country we're a little bit snobby about renting. We think renting is for poor people, whereas in countries like Germany, it's just what you do. You rent. 50% of the market rents. In the US, 50% of the retirement market rents. Why is that? We've talked a little bit, I think, about in America and the US, people move more for their jobs. So you might move every 2 years, therefore you rent. Whereas in the UK, we're a bit more static and we tend to buy, and then we might drive a bit further for our jobs. So we have traditionally been a nation of homeowners. So if you buy your retirement apartment at the age of 70, that can be amazing and life-changing and be the best investment you've ever made. If you live in it for 20 years, you get all the benefits of the community and beautiful new stock. It's built for you. You can die there because it really works. And then when you die, up to 30% of the value of that apartment goes back to the developer. So that's known as the exit fee. So if you've lived there for 20 years and then you give up 30%, that's fine, because you've probably made a bit of money on the appreciation of that stock. If you buy that retirement apartment at 83, live there for 18 months and then die, you're giving up 30% of your estate for the 18 months that you've had. And it just, so that for me always slightly stuck in my throat. And quite often I would meet somebody when I was in the for sale model, and they'd say, oh, well, it's amazing. Oh, but I think I've left it too late, or I think the move will kill me, or I just can't face it. And that shouldn't be underestimated, actually, should it? For any of us, managing a house move is really hardcore at any age. Managing it at 83 is pretty intense. And so they don't make the move, and they go back and they live in their 4-bedroom house, which is, completely underutilized stock, and their bed is now in the dining room, and they haven't been upstairs for the last 2 years, and the house is the thing that will kill them. So our theory was, if you could say to somebody, you can rent this apartment, you can sell your house in your own time, you can wait to get an offer on your house that is the right offer rather than selling under pressure. You don't have to get in a chain. You can move into this apartment over the space of 2 weeks. If you don't like what we're doing for you, you can move out again. You can vote with your feet. You're not stuck living in a community that you don't like simply because you can't sell the apartment again. When you die, your death will trigger a month's notice. So all your children have to do is just come and pack up your stuff. They don't have to manage the whole probate, pay the service charge, try and sell this retirement apartment on. It's a much cleaner estate. We've got couples who might have moved into a 2-bed, and when one of them either dies or moves on to residential care or dementia, the remaining spouse gets to move down to a 1-bed. It's much more flexible. We found people who are excluded from the for sale model. So we have moving in with us, one of my favourite women in Sidcup. She's amazing. She lived in Cornwall. Her house was worth £230,000, but her eldest daughter lived up in Sidcup in Kent. She wanted to move to be nearest the eldest daughter, but £230,000 inside the M25 is not going to go anywhere. She couldn't have bought anything, and so she was stuck in Cornwall and her daughter's up in Kent. But what the rental model allowed her to do was to sell her house in Cornwall, move up, rent with us, and then she just takes a calculated risk, doesn't she? She thinks, I've got £230,000. It's going to cost me 30 grand a year to live at Birchgrove. Therefore, I can live until I'm 94. That'll do me. That's a good call. And so people who are excluded by the for sale model suddenly find that the rental model opens things up a bit for them. It's definitely not affordable because it's expensive getting older as a self-funder, but it is absolutely more accessible to more people. And so that's why we think we can wean people off this obsession with home ownership that we have in the UK.
Are you finding in general that your model, and in conjunction with build to rent and so on in cities, is there a shift in attitude, do you think?
So the first time I was asked to go and speak at a BTR conference, I sort of said, oh yeah, I'll do that. And I had to Google, what the hell is this BTR thing? I was like, oh my God, that's what we do. And I've found there's a whole compatible community of people who are obsessed about the same things I do, fill up and churn. And the only thing I can think about with your question was around changing attitudes. So it's interesting to me that 30% of all student accommodation is guaranteed by the grandparents. So to a certain extent, my old gits are already playing in this rental pond, aren't they? They're guaranteeing the rent. Is that in some way psychologically making it more acceptable for them because they're starting to understand it as a tenure that's, something that they can experience from a different access point? But I would absolutely caution, like every day, I have a conversation with someone who is taken aback by the idea of renting in retirement and will say things like, oof, I've always considered myself a homeowner. I don't think I could consider myself a renter. It goes to their sense of self, especially actually for the male prospects. They judge themselves by their estate. And the women worry that a rental offering won't allow them to build a home in the same way that they can when they own it. So there's definitely a long way to go for me to make rental as acceptable as owning, but you can get them there.
Yeah, okay. What about locations? Is there a move towards more urban locations for senior living developments, and are they being considered as one element of a mixed use scheme, for example?
I think we realise that older people don't necessarily want to be shoved down the end of the cul-de-sac or out in the countryside where they're cut off. It's really interesting. So on the sites that I've built, there's always a side that kind of looks over a busy road or whatever, and you think, oh, geez, who's going to choose that apartment? And of course, those ones sell first because people just want to feel like they're part of something, watch the comings and goings. They're not bothered at all by living on a main road or opposite a school, or so they like to be in the thick of it. I can see all day long my residents trot into town. It's their daily exercise. They like to go to the post office. They like to go and pick up their own prescriptions. They like to do their shopping once a day, so they'll go to Morrison's daily rather than do the one big weekly shop. So going in and out of the high street all day long is it gives, I don't know, I don't want to say it gives us a sense of purpose, like there's nothing else going on, but it gives you a destination to walk to. So they're really happy with that. So I think as an industry, we have all clicked, and we all hope that retirement living can in some way contribute to a bit of a revival on the high street, that we can take some of that stock, turn it into our apartments, and just have people who spend money during the day, all day long. They'll go and subsidise these little coffee shops and stuff by spending their money. And we hope that we can become part of that sort of slightly revitalised texture that maybe is missing a bit at the moment. From an investment point of view, I think tons of money is now piling into retirement in an urban setting. Companies are being set up that will only exclusively do hyper urban. With the idea of being part of a master plan and putting old people right at the heart of that, I think that is absolutely going to work. So I'm personally not doing it at Birchgrove because my time horizon is much shorter. I need to be in and out by 2024. I don't really have time for a 15-year big master plan. But I hope and wish and would love it to be going lockstep with these beautiful big regeneration projects. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do for both parties.
Okay, it's we've got this far through the interview without mentioning the pandemic, which is probably a first since lockdown started. But it's likely there's going to be a surplus of office and retail space, in towns and cities up and down the country. Can you see potential for converting these into senior living schemes?
Totally, absolutely. I'd love to do a permitted development. I'd love to convert. I mean, I do myself convert quite a few listed buildings into our retirement, but I'd love to convert an office because it just maybe has a bit more texture than a new build. It might be a sort of landmark building. That would be lovely to live in that. The speed of it would be fantastic. Just before lockdown, I think quite a few of us were bidding for permitted development, and actually the C3 buyers were still paying more than we could pay for a C2. But since lockdown, I know that us C2 buyers have been winning quite a lot more of those bids. So I sort of hope that there is a little margin here, little point in time where we can successfully get some of these office conversions off the ground, just because we're the only ones standing right now, and prove that it can really work. You're right in the middle of things. Nice quick build, lots of lovely windows there ready for you to populate. I think it's a great idea. I just want to make sure that we can afford it. We can get in there ahead of the C3 guys.
You mentioned earlier the investment community, as some of them are only looking at hyper urban schemes, but has the investment community in general changed its attitude towards senior living? Has it changed over the last 3 or 4 years?
I would say the money's always been wanting to get into retirement because the demographics speak for themselves. I feel that the money was looking for somebody to prove the rental model, because this lovely long recurring income is what they're looking for. But the natural conservatism of banks, quite rightly, they've got to protect our money. They can't just throw it around. So they have been asking for someone to prove the model before they pile in. I think that's done now. All the big players now have significant parts of their stocks. I think Legal & General have got potentially 10% of their stocks rental. McCarthy and Stone, who's the biggest retirement housing builder, they're now doing entirely rental only developments, which is a really exciting development for me. The more people who do it, the less frightening it's going to be for the punter. So has it changed? I'd say we're probably a year away from the money just saying, yeah, here you go, we believe in the rental model. It's still a little bit sticky in the investment community. They're not quite convinced yet that we can do it, but we're minutes away, I think, from it just becoming the mainstream.
Okay, and finally, Honor, how would you see the sector developing over the next 5 years? What do you think will be the biggest changes in the development and operation of senior living projects in the next 5 years?
Oh, George, that's such a massive question.
Oof, three bullet points, Honor.
Urban, absolutely. I'd like to prove smaller. I think the residents prefer smaller communities. If you ask a resident, they say they want 29 apartments in a block. That's, for them, is perfect. If you ask a developer, they'll say 180, and somewhere between those two numbers is the sweet spot. But I think smaller is beautiful. Rental, obviously, is going to end up being about, I'd say, 25% of the market. That would be brilliant. And I really like the idea of intergenerational living. So I love the idea of students living with old people and everybody getting something out of that. Students getting subsidised rent in return for spending time, putting up shelves for older people. I think it massively improves mental welfare for students, just having a bit of wisdom around rid of old people. So yeah, urban, rental, intergenerational. Those are my top 3 tips, George.
Fantastic. Honor, thanks very much for your time.
Loved it. Thanks for asking me, George.
Thanks for listening to the Urban Living Podcast. This series previews some of the content you'll be able to hear at the Urban Living Festival, a new kind of hospitality and real estate event which is taking place in London on November the 25th and 26th. To find out more, visit www.urbanlivingfestival.com.